The North Atlantic in late May of 1941 was a place where even the bravest sailors felt small. Waves slammed into each other like colliding mountains. The wind carried the sharp smell of cold iron. And somewhere beneath that furious ocean, a giant rested in the dark. The German battleship Bismarck. A warship that had once shaken an empire. A ship so feared that Winston Churchill himself issued an order that echoed around the world. Sink the Bismarck. In just 8 days, the greatest naval chase in modern history unfolded across thousands of miles of open water. It was a story of ambition, tragedy, courage, and the heavy cost of war. Today, 3 miles below the surface, Bismarck lies in silence, surrounded by lost artifacts, scattered medals, and the memories of more than 2,000 men who never returned home. And this is her story. The Bismarck was not built because the world needed another battleship. She was built because Adolf Hitler and the Kriegsmarine believed Germany needed a symbol, a floating announcement that the nation had returned to the oceans with a power unseen since the time of the Kaiser. Construction began in 1936 at the famous Blohm & Voss shipyard in Hamburg. Every rivet, every steel plate, every weld was meant to project dominance. Her specifications read like mythology: 823 feet long, over 41,000 tons, armor up to 12.5 inches thick, 8 15-inch guns that could hurl shells weighing more than 1,700 pounds, a top speed exceeding 30 knots. The workers who built her joked that she was a mountain disguised as a ship. Yet the tone was always serious. Everyone understood that this vessel was going to change something either for Germany or for the world. On the 14th of February, 1939, Bismarck slid into the water before a cheering crowd. The launch ceremony had all the spectacle of a coronation. Flags fluttered, brass bands played, and propaganda ministers boasted that no enemy shell could ever break her armor. To the German public, she represented technological supremacy. To the British Admiralty, she represented a threat that could not be ignored. And to the sea itself, she was simply another challenger. A challenger that would soon learn how unforgiving the North Atlantic could be. When Bismarck entered service in August of 1940, her crew trained relentlessly. The Baltic Sea became their classroom. They drilled gunnery, flooding procedures, damage control, torpedo avoidance, and night operations. They slept in hammocks slung between steel beams. They shined their Kriegsmarine belt buckles. They carried gold service medals, pocket knives engraved with personal initials, and small photographs of loved ones taped inside their lockers. The mission assigned to Bismarck was clear: break through into the Atlantic and destroy Allied supply lines. If they could cut those convoys, those lifelines that fed Britain, then the island nation could collapse. By early 1941, her crew was ready. On the evening of the 18th of May, Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen slipped away from Gotenhafen under the cover of darkness. This operation had a name that would become infamous: Operation Rheinübung. The goal: break into the North Atlantic, sink merchant convoys, and cripple the British economy. It was a mission full of confidence, and one that would lead Bismarck into the most dramatic naval engagement of the war. Inside this fortress of steel were personalities that would shape every moment of her final days. Admiral Günther Lütjens, known for his calm, almost icy demeanor. He was strategic, disciplined, and unwilling to risk his men without reason. But he was also bound by duty, a duty that would eventually trap him. Captain Ernst Lindemann, charismatic, proud, a man who believed deeply in naval tradition. He adored his ship, once telling an officer, "Bismarck is alive. She feels every wave." The crew, 2,200 sailors, young, energetic, most between 18 and 24. Their personal effects told their stories. Small wooden crosses, Kriegsmarine daggers, gold-edged medals, letters sealed in wax, a harmonica carried by a machinist from Cologne, a silver watch passed down through generations. Every man believed he would eventually return to Germany. No one imagined that for nearly all of them, this voyage was one way. At dawn on the 24th of May, 1941, Bismarck encountered the Royal Navy's pride, HMS Hood, accompanied by the new battleship HMS Prince of Wales. The sea was calm. The sky was low and gray. And within minutes of the first shots, the world changed. A 15-inch shell from Bismarck pierced Hood's thin deck armor, plunging deep into a magazine. The resulting explosion tore the mighty ship apart. A fireball erupted that could be seen for miles. The hull split. And in less than 3 minutes, Hood disappeared beneath the sea. 1,415 British sailors were killed. Only 3 survived. For Britain, this was not merely a loss. It was a national trauma. That same day, Winston Churchill delivered the command that would become one of the most famous orders in naval history: sink the Bismarck. And with those words, the greatest naval hunt ever launched began. More than 50 British warships would soon converge on a single target. The hunter had become the hunted. On the evening of the 26th of May, Bismarck found herself being tracked by British reconnaissance aircraft. And then came the swordfish. These were slow, fragile biplanes, their fabric wings and outdated engines looking more like museum pieces than weapons. Yet history often favors the unexpected. One torpedo struck the Bismarck's stern and jammed her rudder at a fatal angle. From that moment, she was doomed. The ship could only sail in a slow, uncontrollable arc. She could no longer escape. She could no longer hide. Night fell. Cold rain swept across the decks. Inside the ship, the atmosphere changed from determination to resignation to sorrow. Some sailors wrote last letters. Some polished their medals. Some prayed. And some stared silently into the steel walls, listening to the distant thunder of approaching engines. Early the next morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 27th of May, the silhouettes of British battleships appeared on the horizon. Rodney, King George V, Norfolk, Dorsetshire. The sea around Bismarck erupted. Shell after shell screamed overhead and hammered the ship. Flames engulfed the forward superstructure. Main turrets jammed. Bulkheads crumpled. The bridge was shattered. Captain Lindemann was killed instantly. Admiral Lütjens died soon after, giving no last words. Yet Bismarck refused to sink. Even in agony, she fought to stay upright. When oceanographer Robert Ballard discovered the wreck in 1989, he expected to find a hull torn open by shells. Instead, he found something different. Bismarck's armor belt was not penetrated in a catastrophic way. The deck showed massive damage, but not the type that would doom the ship. What Ballard found was evidence of scuttling charges. Explosives set by German engineers to sink their own ship. He also found flood valves opened manually, internal blast patterns consistent with self-destruction, no hull break consistent with a magazine explosion. The hull intact enough to confirm the ship did not break apart on the surface. The conclusion shared by many historians is clear. The British defeated Bismarck. The Germans sank her. Both statements can be true. And at 10:40 in the morning, water surged across the deck. The giant leaned starboard, sank stern first, and vanished beneath the Atlantic. Out of 2,200 men, only 115 survived. The North Atlantic waters were near freezing. Oil slicks burned their eyes and choked their lungs. Debris floated everywhere: planks, ammunition boxes, broken rafts, torn life jackets. Some men clung to floating wreckage. Some cried out for help. Others drifted silently, too weak to speak. British ships rescued as many as they could, but an urgent submarine threat forced them to retreat. Dozens of survivors were left behind, alone in the endless sea. Many sank beneath the waves during the night. Their medals, their watches, their photographs. Everything went down with them. The few who survived carried memories that never healed. They remembered the smell of burning diesel, the screams that faded into the storm, the sound of the Bismarck breaking apart beneath their feet. Bismarck lies at a depth of nearly 4,800 meters. At that depth, the pressure is crushing over 7,000 pounds per square inch. Light cannot reach it. Sound barely travels. And yet, the wreck is remarkably preserved. Ballard's expedition found the hull standing upright. The bow pointed forward proudly, as if still leading the ship into battle. The armor belt intact. The main turrets blown free by the descent, lying in the sand like fallen giants. Scattered across the debris field were artifacts, small fragments of lives interrupted. Kriegsmarine emblem belt buckles. A gold officer's medal. Waterlogged logbooks. A single enamel cup. A brass compass. A rusted harmonica. Shoes, boots, and shattered binoculars. A locker door with a photograph still glued to the inside. No human remains. The sea took them long ago. What remains is the ship. And the silence. A silence thicker than any armor ever forged. Despite decades of research, many questions linger. Did Admiral Lutyens truly wish to avoid combat with Hood? Why did the torpedo hit the exact weak point needed to jam the rudder? Who ordered the scuttling charges to be set? Were the survivors right when they claimed the ship was already sinking before the British torpedoes hit? Why is the wreck so intact compared to other warships of the era? And there are more personal mysteries. The gold medal found near the stern. Who wore it? Did it belong to a young officer writing home the night before the final battle? What became of the unsent letters? What final thoughts filled the minds of men who knew the ocean was about to claim them? Some mysteries rest with the ship. Others rest with the sea. None may ever be answered. In the end, the Bismarck story is not only about steel, power, or strategy. It is a story about impermanence. A reminder that even the strongest creations of human hands, fortresses of metal, symbols of nations, can fall in days. When ROV lights sweep across Bismarck's corroded hull today, they illuminate more than rusted steel. They reveal echoes of ambition, echoes of fear, echoes of bravery, echoes of 2,200 young men who lived, hoped, and died far from home. Bismarck stands in the deep ocean as a monument not to victory or defeat, but to memory. Because the sea remembers everything. And in the dark silence 3 miles below the surface, the Bismarck still endures, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a story carved into the ocean floor, a reminder of what war gives, and what it takes forever.